Welcome to the 10-Minute Life Lesson Podcast. I'm Jay Cleveland Payne. When this timer hits 9 minutes and 55 seconds in this recording, you'll have a fully developed life lesson that you can take with you and begin immediately implementing. The podcast falls under the umbrella of my greater personal development efforts, all under the Your Better You brand. For information on accountability coaching or to gain access to tools, tricks, or life hacks, visit yourbetteryou.info. Thank you for joining me on the journey today. Now, here is this week's life lesson. I'm not sure what your actual stoppage is, but trust me, I've been at various points in time where it feels like the only thing left to do is to not do, to give up, to just be done with it. The motivation is gone. The spirit is done. You are completely dead. You gave it a hard try and it didn't work out. And not only did it not work out, now you're left to clean up a big mess or pay a big cost to clear things out. Times get hard, things go bad, and you may find yourself at places where you're completely out of the motivation to literally get up and move on going forward. Now, as I believe, and this is something that I have to take in very tough and very hard on myself, if you wake up every morning, then you've got something you need to do, so you might as well get out of bed and get at working something. So even when I get to my worst spots, I know there's something that needs to be done, something I need to do, and I still have to do it. So for me, often, sometimes the main motivation is I got a kid who has to eat, and, she insists on pretty weird and pretty expensive diet. So I've got to get out and do something to make sure that she gets fed and, have family and friends and people that depend on me. But what do you have to do to kind of shake yourself off and keep things going when you just don't have the motivation? And that's beyond the fact that you put your thoughts and processes and your hopes and dreams, if you will, in the fact that you must do something for someone else. Because yes, doing it for someone else while you don't have the motivation is great, but that's not sustainable. At some point, you've got to basically respark yourself and keep things going. But the purpose is to keep things in motion while that spark is being recreated in all the millions and myriad of processes that it may take to happen. Because sometimes it takes a long time to dig yourself out of that hole when you've been spending a lot of time digging it in the first place. These are 4 things that you can do in the process when you have no motivation to keep yourself prepared for the next step of motivation. Not so much to focus and power through in some cases, but this just basically set yourself up for a new set of downs, using the football analogy. Number 1, you just have to let the work you do just be bad for a while. You have to just come to a conclusion that right now is not your best work, your best time, your best effort, and it's not going to be because of whatever it is that's laying on you to keep you from being as good as you want to be, progressing. It could be the team you're working with is not so great, and so that team is not going to allow you to produce the correct stuff. It could be whatever pressures on your life, whether it's personal, whether it's health, is just not putting you in the right set of mind, the right state where you can do things on a grand scale like you'd like to do. So it's going to be as good as it's going to be, which is unfortunately not as good. Now, what you may find is based on your level of proficiency, a 60% you is much better than a lot of people's 85%. So trust me, it's going to be worth it, doable, and usable. But as far as your personal best, that's not happening anytime soon. Allow yourself a little bit of time to not be so great at what you're doing. And as the spark comes back up, you'll find you'll be doing greater work faster than you think. You can also look at the long-term goals you have, the long, big projects you have, and break them up into short-term goals, time goals that you can knock out pretty quickly or fairly quickly without seeing it in a big picture view. Because what may be weighing you down is the large mass, just humongous task that is a big picture view that you can't seem to figure out how you're going to get there. Don't think about the big picture for right now. Think about a lot of little small pictures, a lot of small steps, a lot of baby actions to get you to that larger action. And as you'll see, just like before, as you work more and more of those smaller actions, you'll progress closer to the big goal. And then you can take a bigger look at that big goal, which at that point, because you're so much closer to it, won't be so large. It'll be right there in front of you. And you can use that as a sustainable and manageable goal on its own, not just as one large, massive goal to push forward and work through step by step by step, because the steps you're doing are actually smaller goals that you're accomplishing, taking things off the box to make sure you have made your way going forward. One more thing you can do is literally leave. And these last 2 follow along those same lines. Leave where you are. Like I said before earlier, maybe you're working with a team right now that is not performing. Maybe you're working in a place right now that's on the downgrade. Maybe your company, whether it's a company you founded or a company you went into, just isn't prepared to handle the next couple of steps. it might be time to go someplace else. Something that I said very often when I worked in broadcasting, because there's a lot of movement going on to people who get to a spot and then they find there is no progression from where they are. They started someplace and just got stuck, is sometimes you have to find the right place to be. Sometimes there are better opportunities in other places, far, far away, in some very scary places, but you have to be there for the opportunity. If you're finding too much of a competition for very few open slots for moving up, then that doesn't mean there's no chance for you to move up in the world of your life, the world of your profession, the world of that you're working around in. It just means that building, that company, that place is a little too small for a lot of upward movement. And especially if you seem like it seems like they're always bringing people in to take those spots because, like before, they need new blood too. So if your projects aren't working, if your big goal is not progressing, then maybe it's time to work on that project and that goal, or work in it for a different project, a different goal in a different location. Literally move somewhere else. This may be moving from one company to the next one across the street, the competitor. It may be moving down the road, literally out of state to someplace different. And it might even mean moving out of that profession, moving out of that career field, doing something totally different, taking your skills and taking them to something else and using them to progress in some other way, make somebody else better in a way that you didn't think about was possible. So be open to new possibilities and newer things to do in new locations that are not where you are, because it may literally be you're so mired in the space you're in that that space is what's holding you back, and you need to be in a different space. And how far away that space is, it all depends. And the final one, which is the complete fall off the planet version, is take a break. Stop doing what you're doing for right now until whenever. Maybe you can determine what that stop what you're doing is. And maybe you can say, I'm taking off a day, I'm taking off a week, I'm taking off a month, I'm on sabbatical, whatever it is, to be away from what you're doing, and then literally not do it for a while. It may be hard to get out of that sort of process, but trust me, as a person who had to get out of the thought process of being in broadcasting and showing up every morning and producing 4 hours of content fresh and brand new every single day because no one was paying me to do that, it was a shock to the system, but I had to stop it. Now, that break ended when I found that I enjoyed it enough and I had enough time away from it so I can build it onto newer projects that worked for me, that still let me be my best and do my best and produce great stuff, I think. But I did have to take a break when, they literally stopped paying me and took away my key to go to the studio every day, and had to sit by myself and relearn what I was going to do, figure out new ways to feed the family, if you will, and then figure out ways to do the thing I love, do the passion projects, do the talking into microphones like I'm doing right now, that work for me to actually enlighten me and motivate me, as opposed to make me feel dread because things weren't working. The break may be forced upon you. Maybe you get fired from something. Maybe you get pushed away from something, locked out, and you have to deal with it that way. You may not have a choice but to take a break. You do have to actually stop and take the break. Being forced to, or choosing to stop doing that thing that's you think you love, you think you're supposed to be doing, but it's stressing you out so much, will allow you to focus on what it is about it that you actually love, or whether you're just sort of stuck into the repetitive motions of doing it. What I found in my broadcasting career was, yes, I love the broadcasting stuff, but I wasn't the biggest fan of what I was forced to produce based on the corporate scheduling and the scripts that were being handed down. Not that there's anything necessarily wrong with the scripts. It wasn't just pure evil. It just wasn't as creative, wasn't as open as I wanted to produce things. And the environment I was in did not allow much creativity. Therefore, when I had my forced break and was able to get back on my feet, basically stability for just paying the bills, I had open time to produce things as I wanted to. That ended my break. So if things aren't working, if you're just down and just depressed about that project, that maybe it's a work thing you're forced to do that you're trying to work through, there are 4 things to do that you can do to get yourself through a lack of motivation until you can get it motivation again. 1, just let your work suffer for a little bit. It's probably good enough. 2nd, instead of making a big, long, stretching goal, make a lot of short-term goals, specifically timed, so you can knock them out quickly and move to the next one. 3rd is to go someplace else. Physically move someplace else and maybe get out of that job, that position, that place, and do something different so that you can continue doing what you're doing and you love in a different location. And the 4th is to stop doing it altogether until things change, and then you move forward. These may not be the most comprehensive keys to getting out of a motivational funk, but next time you are stuck with something that you just can't move past, try them. See if they do help. Thank you for joining me for this week's podcast. I'm going to step out a little bit from the trying to be life coachy thing and go to a bit of extra honesty in this one and tell you that this episode was a hard one to record, and it was sort of patchworked together. There's a couple of edits as we went through. It's basically a long cut. I didn't take 3 or 4 takes of it. I basically chopped in a couple places and kind of kept going. But this was a hard one to do because I'm sitting in exactly the same location right now. I have been in for a while, but literally looking at the lack of motivation and the lack of and to be honest, lack of ability time-wise to actually produce what it is I want to produce. And so while I myself am stuck in a motivational kind of glut, I'm looking for ways to figure out how to, get my own spark. And the way it's looking right now, the first and the second goals, it's the first and second things I popped out at you. 1, to just let your work suffer for a little bit, which is hard to do. And 2, set the goals into shorter intervals instead of long-term intervals. That's basically where I'm looking at. This is not the time to take a break. And of course, I cannot move to a new location because moving to the location is essentially what put me into where I am now. But because of where I am focusing a lot on just putting out, I don't want to say mediocre work, but not exactly, putting hours in for top tier work because it's just not feasible right now. Hopefully you think my 60% is as good as other people's 75, 80%. So you're going to stick around with me for a while. And trust me, you guys yourselves basically asking for me to keep doing this stuff is part of the motivation that keeps me going. So thank you so much for all of that. Thank you for all the feedback we get, good and bad, because the bad feedback, as long as it's not trollish, allows me to figure out what we need to do to switch up. We are doing a lot more work behind the scenes and getting things back up like the website. And despite my hesitancies to create online groups, I think we're going to have to relaunch some sort of semblance of another online group, not quite a 10-minute life coach type deal, but maybe a smaller version of the Your Better You groups. And we'll go deeper into that once there's more time to do that. This is being recorded in December of 2021. So looks like we're going to probably look at launching something right around the beginning of January, around the beginning of the year in 2022. We will see how we'll do that. It won't be anything spectacular. Won't be anything grand. It's going to be something pretty much just a mishmash of stuff. And hopefully, if you're looking for a group of folks to hang out and talk with, or just a folk, because it's going to be me opening the doors, you might want to consider joining in the group and joining the chat and doing some basically group coaching, looking for a pal type stuff. We'll figure out more about what that's going to be as we get closer to flipping the switch for the new year. Meantime, we have more of these coming. We're pretty sure we're pushing them out as best as possible. Also, more of the Steps Your Better You podcasts, which are easier to do because I literally have a long list of ideas to pull from, and the actual episodes are only 90 seconds. So they're shorter, they're sweeter, they are to the point-ier, and we can get a bunch of those. And they're all being put up very slowly, but being gathered up at the website, yourbetteryou.info. That is yourbetteryou.info. Rebuilding that website, rebuilding that whole thought process, rebuilding that whole home, because trust me, I need it as much as folks out there need it as well. If you're looking for more information on those podcasts, check them out there, and more inspirational stuff there as well. Also look for me on YouTube and just any place your pods are caught. J. Cleveland Payne is my last name. Search for that. You can find those podcasts, which are this one, 10-Minute Life Lesson Podcast, if you just stumbled upon it. And of course, Steps Your Better You and various other things on the YouTube dealing with motivation and inspiration and personal development, because I'm actually pushing myself as a personal development person, not so much as a guru of life, hope, and stuff like that. In the meantime, make sure you are subscribed to the podcast so you don't miss it out on your own. Share it with other people, like-minded folks who are trying to get better at themselves, and be here next week for another edition. Hopefully it will be a little less melancholy, a lot more pep in my step, if you will, but we're going to push one out to keep things going. We're going to kind of push through the muck, if you will, here on the 10-Minute Life Lesson Podcast from yourbetteryou.info.